here in North Meadow. I suppose the best place to get a good look is down at ground level. How did you get to know that?
Well, it's a really extraordinary plant, isn't it? It's called snake's head because of the way it comes up out of the ground with its flower like that, so it looks like a snake's head. And then fritillary, we think comes from the Latin fritillus, which roughly translates as dice ball. And I think that refers to its very pattern there. There's some really fun local names, Dead Man's Bell, Checkered Warrior, Folfalar in Staffordshire is another example. So people have given them exciting names because they're such an exciting plant. Yes, there's about 10% of the site has white glass as opposed to pink. We think of the same species. I call it pink. Fritillary coloured.
So is it every function or like brown? I thought that would be a stretch rather than a yield.
No, it's a really interesting point. The snake's head fritillary seems to like growing in floodplains that are well drained. And so this habitat suits it really, really nicely. And the snake's head fritillary and all the other species that are found here are really a product of a very sustainable agricultural system.
We've got very few flood meadows left, haven't we?
It's a terrible shame, and this is an incredibly rare habitat. There's less than 1,200 hectares left in the country. And because we think that about 40% of our rivers are no longer in connection with their floodplain, if we were to try and recreate some more of this, we could manage floodplains with nature rather than against it.
So what you're saying is we have more places like this, we might have
Yes, potentially, because it helps to spread the flood water out and takes the flooding off areas downstream.
North Meadow has remained largely unchanged for centuries. Every year when haymaking is finished, the land has been turned over to grazing, and that's always protected from drainage work and planting. These days, volunteers help to monitor the rare and diverse range of plants. North Meadow became a national nature reserve 45 years ago, and among the things you can spot here are the delicate cuckoo flower and the vibrant marsh marigold.
27 centimetres.
But today, Emma and her team are carrying out their annual survey into the general well-being of the star of the show, the snake's head fritillary.
We're going to place this very carefully over this highly technical bamboo head.
Like that?
Yeah, perfect.
Good.
Yeah, that's it.
With our 1 metre square grid in place, we painstakingly log every fritillary we can see, including the tiny single-leaf newcomers. And then we record their height.
And that's up to about 19 centimetres there.
Across the meadow, there were 200 such squares, accurately placed in the same spot year after year, thanks to the cairns and precision guidance for GPS. How long have you been doing this for?
This is our 19th year, so it's a good, quite long-term study.
And what is it telling you?
Well, what we can see is that the numbers of fritillaries on this site are generally increasing, particularly the numbers of flowering plants are generally increasing.
So, all in all, things are looking pretty good.
They are, yeah.
The work now being done by both Natural England and Emma and her friends through the Floodplain Meadows Partnership should ensure that this beguiling landscape continues to be safeguarded as living, flowering history. The seas around our coast are both awesome and treacherous. My very first film for television, way back in the late 1960s, was about a little North Sea cargo ship that ran into all kinds of trouble. Her name was the Lizzie and Annie. In her long and eventful life, she was in 7 collisions, ran aground 3 times, and even sank and got refloated. No wonder that Lizzie and Annie went into the record books as one of the most accident-prone ships ever. But she kick-started my career, and unlike thousands of other ships that have been wrecked around our coasts, she did survive, On the Llŷn Peninsula in North Wales, I heard the story of another ship whose misfortune turned out to benefit the locals. The sea is a constant presence on the Llŷn Peninsula. It helps create the climate and dominates the way of life here. Although they do not look it today, these waters can be some of the most treacherous on our coastline. To discover more, I've arranged a date with a stunner by the name of Vilma. And there she is. She was beautiful. And I'm looking at boy. Conditions don't get more perfect than a day like this. I'm joining Scott. We don't see boats like this every day, Scott. You must be very proud of it. Tell me a bit about the history of this boat.
She's built in 1934 in Denmark as a fishing boat.
What have you sort of transformed her into? Because she doesn't look like a fishing boat now.
No. The whole form is very much like the old British sailing coasters. So we based on a trading schooner and we rigged it vessels.
So she looks now much like a lot of coastal sailing boats coming into harbours around the coast with a rubber.
So yes, 200 years ago, yes, with this sort of rig we went back from the West Coast.
I just haven't any interest in the waters around here.
They are particularly bad around this part of the coast. It's a very rocky shore.
Navigating this hazardous peninsula is no mean feat, especially in a boat like this. Scott's shown me a chart of the worst currents.
You can see here that the tide run at up to 3.5 knots, which is a strong tide. It is a particularly strong tide there. In Valenti Sound, the doing more up to 6 knots. There's not many lights on this coast. There's Valenti Lighthouse. The major light is actually on the North Magazine, so that's a long way away. So it's basically a numbered coast.
Well, to show you just how perilous it can be, in the past 180 years, no less than 142 ships have been wrecked around the peninsula, and one in particular has become something of a legend. You check the brief. Just open it. To learn more, I'm heading for dry land, and I've got my own personal escorts to take me back to shore. It's 110 years since the Stewart, a cargo ship a lot larger than this vessel, set out from Melbourne heading for New Zealand, but it didn't get very far. Local historian Tony Jones has studied the story. Well, tell me exactly what happened.
Well, it was Easter Sunday, and early hours of the morning, and there was thick fog, and pretty calm, like today actually.
She got lost,
She got completely lost because of the dense fog.
So when did she come ashore?
She came ashore just the other side of the big rock there. She sailed right up the rocks, and came crashing onto the rocks with a thundering water and everything.
What happened to the crew? I mean, were they injured or what?
They were very fortunate. They got into a lifeboat and came short of the bail there. The plan of action was to come back at dawn and get back on board and sail us away. But when they did actually get back in the morning, they could see straight away she broke the keel, she was broken in half there, and so it was lost.
No way they were going to New Zealand.
No way.
So what about the cargo?
Well, she got a mixed cargo of porcelain, cotton. There was even 6 gallon yellows in there. Yes. And one of the local guys came to his back, so they carried one up there.
That's a pretty help himself, isn't it?
Yes, but the start price was the whiskey. There was
Whiskey galore.
What they called at the time, there was a large consignment of whiskey. And being a Sunday, no one was in the way to let the customs know about the rank. And by the time Mr. Mason Campbell, the Chief Customs Officer of African Harbour, there was 300 people here. Some said they were like a swarm of locusts all over the rack. And lots of stuff had gone. All good stuff.
And then they had to hide it.
Yes, they used to hide them in laboratories. But things they used to get so far they couldn't remember over there. And we're still finding beyond that here, only 30 years ago.
Right.
I carried on even underneath the customer's eyes. One way getting whiskey up the path was women used to have bottles of whiskey in the doors. And there was one account the customers were stopping one road and she had hands in them because they said, "Your hands are just to frisk them." I said, "Swish with them." It always felt with them to the officers. Yeah.
And was anybody ever arrested for all of this?
Well, there's no account of anybody at all being arrested, which I find that quite strange, but I think they didn't, who could they arrest? They didn't have to arrest the whole peninsula. You know, so
They ran a great party.
the party went on for months, and they said it was the best Easter egg that this village ever had.
Now, what's left apart from the folklore are a few battered remains of the wreck. A constant reminder that danger is ever present along this coast. Understandably, our ever-changing countryside has inspired many poets throughout the ages. And though I'm not in their league, I've always enjoyed writing down my thoughts.
I owe a great deal to the school. The teachers and headmaster at the time here really taught me, I think, a lot of English language, which as a journalist you really do need.
That was Henry County Primary School in Bennett Road, Leeds, where a teacher encouraged me occasionally to enter a national writing competition. Although I didn't win the big prize, I did win 10 shillings, worth around £20 today. My first feat, and that's when it dawned on me that it might just be possible to make a living from writing. Well, certainly, someone who struggled in that respect was one of my favourite poets, John Clare. The spring comes in with all her hues and smells, in freshness breathing over hills and downs. All woods where May her gorgeous drapery flings, the meads wash fragrant by their laughing springs. Fresh and new open flowers, untouched and free from the bold rifling of the amorous bee. Unlike many other famous poets, John Clare came from a humble background, and he wrote passionately about the rural life that he knew. I discovered more about his life and works on a visit to his childhood home. I'm in North Cambridgeshire, in the village of Helmston. It's here that a man described as one of the poorest and most troubled of the great English romantic poets found inspiration. John Clare was born in 1793 and spent most of his life in this cottage. He was a son of a humble labouring family, and though he had little education, he had no trouble in finding the words to write about the countryside that he loved.
Up this green woodland ride, let softly row, and list the nightingale, she was just here. Hush, let the wood gate softly clap, for fear the noise might drive her from her home of love.
At one point, John Clare, who was known as the peasant poet, even outsold Keats. His family home is now dedicated to his life and his rich imagination. And I'm meeting the curator, David Dykes, to learn more. David, can you see a scene coming up from John Clare? Who else will be living in this small cottage?
We had 6 children, his wife, his sister, his mother and father. So you've got 3 generations of Clare family in this small cottage.
He was writing his poetry about all the natives.
That's why he walked out into the fields to write his poetry, and it was inspiration.
All nature has a feeling. Woods, fields, brooks are like eternal, and in silence they speak happiness beyond the reach of books.
And this humble boy from this little cottage found himself in London as a literary scholar.
Absolutely, that's where he got the name of the Possum Poet, because he didn't fit in there, and nor did he fit in here. And when he came back here, fame came to come. Because people didn't believe he wrote written poems, they thought it was written for them. And this is a diary that he kept in 1825, and in it he records some people who came and looked at him and said, "Are you actually the person who wrote the poem?" And so it became almost like a selection.
So he didn't cope well with the celebrity.
Absolutely not, no. And not even any other country. It was always just a labourer who wrote poetry.
It's as if there were two John Clares, one placed by the literary elite alongside Wordsworth, Byron, and the other scraping a living alongside his illiterate fellow farm workers. One of his modern local admirers is Penny Stevens. Penny, what is it that makes Clare's poetry so special to you today?
It's because he looked at the world around him all the time, every bit of nature, every hour of the day, every animal, every species, all the insects and birds, and he described them so beautifully.
In a way, then, he was one of the very first about that.
It was, and he wrote very personally, very, very beautifully.
In his poetry, he used an awful lot of local dialect.
Yes, he did. My favourite is the word he uses for the long tailed tip, little birds, and he calls them gun barrels.
And for the all-round fields and closing road, and coy bomb barrels, 20 in a drove, flit down the hedgerows in the frozen plain, and hang on little twigs and start again.
Clare loved the woods and the flatlands. They represented freedom.
But that joy was to be short-lived because the common land, the open fields where his family had toiled for centuries, was taken away from them. During the 19th century, right across the country, Enclosures Acts approved by Parliament put much of that land into private hands.
This denied Clare the right to explore the countryside that defined his writing. He had long struggled with his mental health and, in his early 40s, was sectioned and sent to an asylum in Essex. He continued to write poetry, but after a few years had stopped it, walking for 4 days back to his beloved village of Hampstead.
A few steps from his cottage, perhaps a little too close, then the Bluebell Inn. And what with his long ale and his increasingly fragile mental state, things started to go downhill for John Clare.
To cope with his black moods, he spent a bit too much time in the pub, drinking and playing folk songs that he picked up from gypsies who lived in the woods. He was admitted again to an asylum, and eventually the words stopped flowing.
Someone wrote to him at the asylum saying, "Why not quiet?" He writes, "Dear sir, I am in a madhouse. I quite forget your name. You must excuse me, for I have nothing to communicate and I have nothing to say."
A tragic end for a man who found so many wonderful words to say. Now, as part of the BBC's Food and Farming Awards, here on Country Farm, we want to celebrate young countryside champions between the ages of 16 and 24. You could be a young farmer, adapting your farm to the challenges facing the industry. A young naturalist helping to save wildlife. An environmentalist. Or your mission might be to open up the great outdoors to as wide an audience as possible. There's so many exciting countryside projects with innovative young people at the helm. So we want to hear from you. You can nominate now at the BBC Food and Farming Awards website, www.bbc.co.uk/food awards, where you can also find how to nominate by post, the terms and conditions, and privacy notice. Nominations close just before midnight on Monday, May the 17th. I'm celebrating 50 years as a presenter on BBC One, and looking back at some of the fascinating places I've visited for Country Farm. And I've been reporting from Northern Ireland since the start of my newsroom days in the early 1970s.
Which time will you try and play outside?
There's usually the street, Level Street.
And for many years, of course, the stories were mainly to do with unrest.
The recent troubles in Northern Ireland began over 11 years ago, but in the past few weeks they once again been making news right across the world.
But on Country Farm, I've been able to explore Northern Ireland's beautiful countryside many times, and I'll never forget travelling on boulevard of ancient trees in County Hampshire. Now, world famous because in Game of Thrones. When I was there, you could drive beneath the trees, but now only farm vehicles are allowed. This incredible avenue of beech trees is known as the Dark Hedges. It stretches for about half a mile, and just look at the way they branches form and stray out in sinister patterns as the trees mingle together. It makes you wonder why the two because all around the hedges are just normal length for all the country roads around Europe. So here, we have a strange procession of trees, a number of which have blown over in recent years. It was the danger of falling trees which led the local farmers on whose land the dark hedges stand to take action. They called on tree surgeon Dominic Harrison, and together they set up a preservation trust to conserve this outstanding natural feature.
It is.
Right, I want to get a fresh perspective on the hedges, so I'm going to follow Dominic high into the treetops.
Oh, yeah.
Spectacular, isn't it?
What are they doing here?
Well, they were planted originally as an avenue that went up to the house at the end of the road. No one knows whether it was a hedge that got out of control and was neglected, or whether indeed there were trees that were planted.
So how many were originally?
There would have been over 200 originally when the avenue was completed, and now there's about 100 remaining.
What is the average life of a beech tree then?
Well, it said 300 years, 100 years to grow, 100 years to live, and 100 years to die. So
all of these are
they're in decline, they're approaching the end of the life. Yeah. Well, what we're trying to do is implement a replanting program where as the trees blow down, we'll then start to replant.
So we're going to bring in some full-size trees from elsewhere.
Well, we're running tests at the minute to try and grow from seed the progeny of these original trees to try and preserve their genealogy.
But from seed, that's going to take a lot of time.
It's going to take, yeah, it's going to be a long time.
And what should we do on this particular tree?
Well, the focus today is deadwooding, really. There's a deadwood in there which right over the road, so we have to remove that. There's another one above my head. So it's certainly got some pieces to do.
I'll leave you to it. It would certainly be a tragedy if the dark hedges were to gradually disappear. During all my years in reporting, I've met many thousands of people from all walks of life, including some famous faces. From royalty to theatre royalty.
Well, thank you.
I've been learning my lines.
Of course you do.
And some prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, and David Cameron. My most recent famous face belonged to a fellow Yorkshireman who inspired the nation during the pandemic by going through a book, Captain Sutton.
My background comes from the Yorkshire Dales, so I'm really a true countryman.
Because when you were a boy in Keighley, which is near Bradford, isn't it? You weren't far from Croxy country.
That's right, Rich. When I was to Moore, as a boy, I used to wander over Elsie Moore in an uncle.
And yeah, I mean, I can remember as a young lad going, well, he was sticking backs in the back and things like that. You got those sort of memories?
That's right. I think we all did. We had a jam jar with the British string around it, and we put some sticker backs or anything we could find that would wriggle and put it in the jar. It became much of the, I can't say much was all the very pleased, but you had to put up with it all the time.
But then, in 1940, you joined the army. And you ended up, didn't you, after being in India, in Burma, which is now Myanmar. My dad was there. He was a prisoner of war with the Japanese for 3.5 years, and he was on the death railway.
Roberta Bon Army. Those are great people who must be remembered too, among people like your father.
Captain Tom will be long remembered by all of us who admired the way that he walked 100 meters with Garden to mark his 100th birthday and raised an amazing £38 million for the NHS. Well, I'm going to be having a word with his daughter, Lucy, about a new project in his honour. Hello, Lucy.
Hi, John.
Who's that with you?
This is Tom, my eldest son.
Hi, John.
Good name, Tom.
Lots of Toms in this family.
And tell me about this tree planting initiative that we've got in your dad's name, Lucy.
When my father passed away, I had 700 of my colleagues say, what could they do? And I said, please plant trees. And within a few days, there was enough money between Tree Sisters, which is a global charity, and the Woodland Trust to plant over something like 35,000 trees.
And will some of these trees be planted in Yorkshire?
The Woodland Trust has identified an area of ancient woodland that is going to be planted in his name. And that's in his beloved Yorkshire. I'm aware that the UK has 13% of our land here covered in woodland compared to 37% in Europe. So we do definitely need to plant a lot more trees.
And Tom, have you started planting yet?
Today's the day. I think it's important for my generation and future generations to do that bit. And it's not a hard thing. It's 40p per tree, and you can go and do that very simply.
Because I remember your grandfather telling me that he was concerned about future generations, about climate change, and what the world was going to be like.
Globally, we are cutting down 16 billion trees a year. So planting trees here in the UK, and planting trees in the tropics and the equator, where they grow 3 times faster and sequester 3 to 9 times more carbon, is something that we can all get involved in. And thinking about planting 100 trees in my father's name or in somebody's name, that would be absolutely fantastic, and he would be so proud, wouldn't he?
And which countries are going to be involved?
There's projects all over the tropics and the equator, and including India, which was also a place my father loved.
You know that Country Fire, we've got our own scheme at Climate Britain.
Oh, John, your campaign is fantastic. I think it's something that should be on all of our minds. Anything that we can do to help mitigate climate change is a complete winner.
Well, all the very best for your project, both of you, and lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
What a great project. Trees for Tom. And in Country Fire's Climate Britain, we've already had more than 4,500 entries for our planting events all around Britain. Over the next few months, we'll be selecting entrants at random to join Country Fire presenters to plant trees at Woodland Trust sites around the UK. And thank you to everyone who's planted a tree so far and registered on our interactive Climate Britain map. Now we have over 380,000 trees planted across the UK. That's more than halfway towards our target of 750,000, one for every child starting school in 2020. And if you want to plant trees in your own school or community later in the year, you can register with our Climate Britain partners with Woodland Trust to receive a free tree pack. You can find full details on our website. In the past, our countryside has been the setting for many epic battles, from Hastings on the south coast to Culloden in the Highlands. Terrible things have happened in the most beautiful places. Now, I'm a bit of a history buff, and my travels on Country Fire have allowed me to look into the story of many of these battles, like the one fought at Killiecrankie in Scotland more than 300 years ago. Historian Tony Clark is fascinated by what came to pass around the wooded gorge of Killiecrankie.
In the summer of 1689, the Jacobite clans, who were largely Catholic or Episcopalian, rise up in support of the exile of Davis. And they do that under the leadership of Molly Dundee. And the Protestant King William and his wife Mary send their loyal general Hugh Mackay into the Highlands to put this rebellion down. Exactly, nipping the bud before it could spread. And what happens is, Mackay and 4,000 of his men are marching through here that pass Killiecrankie. But what they don't know at this point is that the other end of this pass is the Jacobite army.
60 years of clashes known as the Jacobite Risings, a series of violent rebellions in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, were about to begin with the Battle of Killiecrankie. That battle took place right here.
Exactly on this hill slope, lovely sunny day at the end of July 1689.
I go there, January.
Quite a contrast. And obviously the place has changed since the 89. But what happens is, Mackay's army is just over the other side of the road, behind the trees.
So they're on the low ground, and the Highlanders are up here.
Yeah, the Jacobite army, which is mostly Highland clansmen, but also 700 Irishmen, is on this ridge just above us. And we're looking at about 2,500 Jacobites and about 4,000 government troops.
So the Highlanders are outnumbered, but they have the advantage of the high ground.
They've got the high ground, and that's what they want, because what they're going to do ultimately is charge down this hill as fast as possible. But the thing is, they don't just crash into the government troops. What they do is, when they get within range, which is probably just this side of the road, a lot of them have muskets. And they fire a shot with their musket, throw the musket down, draw their sword, and then they go in for the kill.
And tell me if this is true, Tony, because I've heard that the Highlanders took off their kilts before the battle. I've heard.
They did indeed. What they were at the time are full of plaids, which are like large blankets that they wrap around themselves. And they're very good for bad weather, but not so good to be fighting in. So before they charge down the hill, they strip off to their undershirts. They also instead take off their shoes so that they've got good grip on the hillside. The Jacobites win. But the problem for the Jacobites is it's very much a Pyrrhic victory because their leader, Dundee, leads a cavalry charge down the hill and he's shot dead within the first few minutes of the battle. And in his absence, the Jacobite cause really becomes a little bit listless.
Killiecrankie may have seen the Jacobites victorious, but then came a series of defeats, ending with that of Bonnie Prince Charlie at the famous Battle of Cologne in 1746. The Jacobite cause was over. So after 60 years, the rebellion is finally crushed. So what were the consequences?
For the Highlands, very dramatic and tragic. There is a total clampdown really on traditional Highland life. At various times, charm is banned, bagpipes are banned, there seems a weapon of war, carrying the weapons is banned, and the whole lifestyle changes.
Because the clearances.
Exactly, and there is a big argument as to whether the clearances are a direct result of the Jacobite rebellion, or whether they are part of the process of social and industrial change. But there is evidence, and certainly the documentary evidence points to almost a program of genocide in places like the Western Highlands, where they're really wreaking revenge on what are by and large innocent populations.
So what had started so gloriously for the Highlands as the Battle of Killiecrankie finally ended in disaster.
It does. It ends up on the moor of Cologne, blood-stained in 1746, and then this dreadful aftermath.
Today, the battlefield of Killiecrankie is a farm's field. There's no trace left of the day that had such far-reaching consequences right across the Highlands. A very different kind of battle that we all had to fight is against the British Rebel. So what's it going to be like with the weekend? Let's find out with the Country Fire forecast.
Thanks, John. I think I can offer you a little bit more weather action for the first week of May. April was quiet, wasn't it? but it certainly wasn't dull. If you haven't already heard, it was a record breaker. April 2021 was the 40th April on record, and we didn't just break that record by a smidge. In some locations, we smashed it. In Aboyne, in Aberdeenshire, for 25 nights, temperatures fell well below freezing, and in Nottingham, we had 5 times more frost than average. But clear skies also led to plenty of sunshine, though. It was the sunniest April on record, and it is one of the driest as well. Now, this perhaps has more of an impact in some respects for farmers out there. If you take a look at this chart, this is based on percentage average rainfall for the month of April. The dark brown, rainfall 20% less than average. And look how extensive the dark brown is in the map. That's actually the little rain you see for the month. So what we need is within Monday, we can mix things up a little bit, and that's exactly what we've got. This area of low pressure will push in from the Atlantic, and it brings some wet and windy weather across the country. So that does mark quite considerable change first thing tomorrow morning. Some of that rain heavy through Northern Ireland into southern Scotland, northern England and Wales. Perhaps not arriving in East Anglia and South East until the end of the afternoon, and it may not arrive until North Scotland either. It's going to be windy or widespread gusts of wind in excess of 40 miles an hour, maybe 60 miles an hour on the exposed southwest coast, and that's going to have an impact on the feel of the weather. The clouds and the rain around, it may well be on the coolest early May bank holidays on the low pressure is going to drift off into the near continent. Plenty of isobars on the chart, and northern sea winds still very much a feature. Gales on the exposed coast driving extensive showers. Pretty raw day on Tuesday, the showers turning wintry in Scotland, northern England, and North Wales. The temperatures dropping once again 6 to 13 Celsius here all the time. As we move out of Tuesday into Wednesday, well, we're still under the cooler element of blue tones, not quite open up, and that could lead to a frost first thing on Wednesday morning. Really quite remarkable for the first week of May. There will be some dry weather around first thing on Wednesday before season showers again, wintry in nature across Scotland and northern England. West is best on Wednesday in terms of sunshine, not necessarily warm together, temperatures really struggling. But this time of year, we should have temperatures around 16 and 17 degrees in the south. Now, this area of low pressure, as we move towards Thursday, begins to rain across southern England. Where this low pressure is going to be sitting is still subject to change. So it needs to be on Thursday. There'll be a front into Scotland, rain showers, and into Northern Ireland, and sandwiched in between the two, dry out and brighter, but not necessarily warmer. There's temperatures only around 10 to 11 degrees as the maximum. Friday, fine today, dry with some sunshine coming through. But look at this, another area of low pressure will be some wet and windy weather as we move into the weekend. With a southerly wind, it may well dry to just something a little bit more to the end of the weekend. Back to you, Joe.
Today I've been looking back at some of the restaurants of rural Britain that are very special to me. And I've had so many memorable moments from my first report in 1989.
Today, we're investigating the upsurge in organic farming.
To no end of adventures. Wow! Oh, good morning. How about that? Why do you like the wind? Training for the challenge that Charles sent me, where she went snorkeling in Wales. I'm sure, right across the UK. Ironwood's gorgeous option.
Look, at the heart of the Peak District National Park, County Galway. That goes to South Wales. Here, in the Inner Hebrides, the South Downs of West Sussex, the Isle of Marlborough, and Laverne. Shropshire, Cumbria, Britain's tallest mountain, and everything. You can't see a thing of it today. But going back to my roots, and as a Yorkshireman, I make no excuses for ending as I started
with a film about the Dales. Now, as you wander around some of our remotest countryside, it's easy to forget that only a few generations ago, they were alive with industry as people mined for things like tin and iron and copper. They built kilns and mills, and the valleys echoed the sound of artisan skills. Such a place is Rosedale. The North York Moors. They're more than 550 square miles. They're the largest expanse of the moorland in England and Wales. It's been a national park since 1952. But the stories within this landscape go back centuries.
150 years ago, these moors looked a very different place as the impact of the Industrial Revolution took over.
Here, the valley of Rosedale would be full of fire, smoke, and noise as the North York Moors went through a short but intense period of ironstone mining, playing a vital role as industry boomed across the nation.
There are dozens of ironstone mines in Rosedale National Park, and these are the ruins of just some of the mighty kilns that were used to remove impurities before the ironstone was sent to the workplace.
But this wasn't the first time Rosedale had seen furnaces in action.
Thanks to projects to preserve structures like this, another much earlier industry in these parts was accidentally discovered. That was glassmaking.
Today, this landscape still nurtures glassmakers. Stephen Gillis and Kate Jones are not only husband and wife, but they've been making glass together in Rosedale for more than 20 years. Their pieces are formed in the slow way, just as glass was made here in these hills centuries ago.
Well, have you any idea when glassmaking did start here? About mid-1500s, the French Huguenots, the first used in France. Why did it come all the way up here to the wilds of the Moors?
Well, I think it's because Rosedale has all the essential raw ingredients to go right. So you've got the sand, which is the core ingredient. You've got potash, which is from burning and cracking, and you've got clay to make the crystals.
And how do you take your inspiration from this landscape? I take the colours that I see, then put that into glass.
Even though you can see the effort happens, the marks made by people in the sculptures of the landscape, and push the landscape into service, whether it was from the legacy of the land line or whether it's today with agriculture, making the land work. It's those marks to sort of bring into place.
Stephen and Kate's studio sits in the heart of the North York Moors National Park, in the village of Rosedale Abbey. It's actually an old blacksmith's forge, so the tradition of keeping main irons in the fire still burns bright.
Today we're going to be attempting to spin out fun plate. There have been two layers of colour on, which when it's cold will be my job to then break the surface.
How is it in the furnace?
The furnace is running at about 1050 degrees centigrade.
Do you ever get used to the heat secret? You've been doing it such a long time. Perfect, isn't it? Shorts all year round.
This is going to be a plate for Kate to engrave.
Now, it doesn't look anything like the shape of a plate.
Not at home, no. Every single form of glass, no matter what the finished form, always starts life as a bubble.
As a master glassmaker, Stephen makes this incredibly difficult process look easy.
So what's your deal? It's either good or it isn't.
That. Alright. Now comes the critical moment when one colour is merged with another.
Here we go.
So now you've got the two colour bubble.
Two colour bubble.
These techniques are still the same as those French Huguenots had used when they were making glass here in National Park over centuries ago.
gonna come past us and be quite warm, okay?
Right, okay, so what's okay?
Safe here.
So this is when it becomes a plate. Wow, that's it. It's expanded. What we there? It's now up to Kent to add her artistic vision, inspired by the beauty and history of their glorious surroundings. She marks out the design by hand directly onto the glass. Then she can begin engraving to reveal the layers of colour hidden within. It looks spectacular.
Thank you very much.
I think this is a wonderful combination of your two very different talents.
Yeah, we have done all that time to colour on. Okay, takes the colour off. I really like the way she's showing the two colours, the blue and the grey.
And when you're blowing the glass, do you ever wonder what Kate is going to do?
I do, we do have professional bickering, but then Kate does what she likes.
Well, I think it's wonderful. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed my little trip down memory lane. And next week, Annie and Matt will be in Cranbourne Chase.
Jules? Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I can sense your presence, but I've got no idea where you are. That's a good time, that's it.
Sorry, I do not have a coordination with this.
It's impossible to be able to comprehend the size of the sheer scale of the night sky.
Hope you can join us then. See you soon.
Beating climate change one step at a time, 39 ways to save the planet available now on BBC Sounds. Here next, it looks into the extraordinary lives behind the items, an Antiques Roadshow World War II special from you on BBC One. Linda Bradford was not only my favourite cousin, but then for many years, my favourite human being.
When people feel desperate, they resort to desperate measures. You can literally put a certain nurse. If we had any thought of it, we'd know we'd never
The brand new series of Crawling Life continues to resonate on BBC One and out there. Always an absolute joy coming up in just an hour, and that's definitely followed by the Line of Duty series finale at 9. Time first on BBC One for priceless stories from the Second World War. It's November the 14th, 1940. Coventry is burning. Over 400 German bombers flew over the city, subjecting it to the most concentrated single attack on British soil seen during the Second World War.
The people of Coventry were to a city in ruins. The attack destroyed not only factories and industrial sites, but also the historic heart of the city, including here at St. Michael's, our only cathedral lost to enemy action during the war.
Across the UK, over 1 million homes were damaged or destroyed, and over 40,000 civilians were killed. The smouldering wreckage of Coventry and other British cities was meant to break the nation's spirit.
But instead, these ruins came to mean so much more. A symbol of triumph over adversity, of renewal, of hope over despair.
Even the wreckage of St. Michael's will be reborn as a sign of peace and reconciliation.
In this special edition of the Antiques Roadshow, we'll explore the stories of what happened after the war, when the smoke had cleared and people all over the world had to survey the rubble around them and rebuild.
Our experts will reveal previously unseen stories from all over the country.
He finishes his time as prisoner of war in a place called Naxal.
As well as new finds within the cathedral walls.
It shows Berlin trying to pull the city together.
We'll hear from those who experienced the final days of the war.
At the end of the war, came back to England and realized this is history.
And the lessons learned when these men and women returned home.
Even if he hadn't survived, he hoped his drawings would survive, so that people could actually see what humans were capable of doing to each other.
The stories of the last days of the war and what followed are deeply personal, so we won't be valuable items today. Instead, we'll be looking at the last time the nation had to start again and look forward to a brighter future. Of all the blitzkrieg's inflicted on British cities, there's an element of emotion, personal vendetta, which surrounds the one here at Coventry.
It was said that Hitler launched the raid as revenge for the Allied attack on Munich the week before. Both cities were cultural as well as industrial centres. By levelling the medieval heart of Coventry, Hitler was engaging in a destructive tit-for-tat.
So total was the destruction that the word Coventry era was used by Nazi high command as a kind of shorthand for the devastation of the city.
There's also belief that the city was sacrificed for the greater good. The story goes that the British government knew about the attack well ahead of time, but to act would reveal they had access to German intelligence, and so the people of Coventry were left to fend for themselves to keep this secret safe.
In truth, Coventry wasn't sacrificed, it was the victim of an attack that couldn't be stopped. British High Command knew that a large attack was happening on the 14th, but they didn't know the target until it was too late.
The result was a city in ruins. We spoke to Nathan Hewitt, who remembered the attack and the days which followed.
I was in Coventry during the war, and the Blitz. I was a schoolgirl, 11 years old. When the Blitz started, we went to shelter, and the Muslim shelter. It was in the dark. The shelter I remember was wet. Big rain and bombs were falling from the sky. We never knew where they were going to land. It ran with such blood. And then exploded. And when they exploded, debris fell, glass broke, dogs barked, and there was a cry of anger from someone. And what was the cry of anger? It reads like often the street. After the raid, when the audience ended, we went to bed. Not to bed. Just as if we might happened. The next morning, it was school day, so the breakfast school went on the road, got so far, and the army were there telling us you can't go any further because of the predators had an exploded bomb. We did exactly the same to Dresden and Cologne. How sad is war? It's absolutely futile. Think about it. If you roll in, I'm going to call you. That's how it goes. I will say this, it was never again.
That sentiment was shared by those surveying the husk of Coventry Cathedral, and they were determined that lessons would be learned from the destruction. 15th, while the fire still burned around him, the man in charge of the cathedral, Provost Richard, stood here and made a vow. That this building would serve a new purpose. It would act as a monument to reconciliation and hope. On Christmas Day, 1940, he delivered a sermon from the ruins. Recorded on the BBC Overseas Service, his message of peace was heard across the world.
What we want to tell the world is this. We are trying, hard as it may be, to banish all thoughts of religion. We are bracing ourselves to finish this tremendous job of saving the world from tyranny and cruelty. We're going to try to make a kinder, simpler sort of world in the days beyond this way.
Later, the cathedral stonemasons and chopped forts took two charred beams from the ruins and lashed them together in the form of a cross. And Provost Howard had that place under an altar made from the rubble of the cathedral, and behind the words were written, "Father, forgive."
But for 5 more years, these calls for peace fell on deaf ears. Coventry would face many more raids, and the attacks on German cities were just as severe. In February 1945, the German city of Dresden faced unimaginable destruction. Over 2 days and nights, the Allies dropped over 3,000 tons of explosives, and fires burned hot enough to melt steel. We heard from the grandson of one British soldier who witnessed the destruction firsthand.
My grandfather, Ernest Thompson, was in the Dorsetshire Regiment, and he was in Europe towards the end of the Second World War. At some point, he went through Dresden, which had been bombed very heavily in 10 bombs. He was looking around in amongst all the rubble. He found a small China cup, which he then carried around him for the rest of the war. And hopefully he's been in the family since on the 18th. It's almost a bit. It was good. Because Dorset really doesn't it? But it's amazingly unblemished as far as I can see from its time in Dresden. For him to find this small China cup in amongst all the ruins is quite extraordinary, really, because there was nothing to stand. So it symbolises the fact that it counts a lot, but you know, it's better life. The government's just a chance of effects, isn't it?
In the ruins of Coventry Cathedral, I'm joining Will Farmer to shine more light on this cup's extraordinary journey.
We've got a beautiful little cup. It's charming. And if you consider where this was found, it's simply quite intriguing when you look underneath, because we have a mark stamped into the base which says Wedgwood. So here we have a lovely little example of Wedgwood redware, dating from 1820, with this lovely decoration in it that was sort of found in Dresden amongst the rock.
So what is a Wedgwood doing in this time?
Wedgwood as a business, designer Wedgwood as a businessman. Because by around sort of 1780, 1790, pretty much 80% of his output was being exported across Europe. So the fact that this little cup has made its way to Dresden is not so unusual.
It's extraordinary to find so perfect in one foot, in the object.
I think that in itself is, you know, so there's one body of things, isn't it? He walks along, looks down, finds this as a little smile. You know, these human beings create something like this that's so small, so precise, so beautiful. It we also as human beings can cause so much destruction.
But that is what we do with it's very hard to have in common. Not only do we trade relationships with the same business, but also we make the common rituals coming together, companionship, conversation, that will come to comfort. We both do it at the same time as trying to choose. So this little cup is a common ritual, a symbol of common wisdom.
As Allied soldiers picked their way through the ruins of Dresden, the war was nearly defended. On May 7, 1945, the German forces finally surrendered, bringing an end to the war
least saw explanation as millions celebrated victory in the war and in Woodland Road. Fighting continued for months in the Far East Pacific, where over 200,000 Allied soldiers were interned as prisoners of war. World Fire heard the story of two survivors, John Wiggins and his friend Ronald Self, celebrated right at the illustration.
We do have table filled with some wonderful, interesting and intriguing items, but the thing that draws me first and foremost is this photograph of two servicemen. And tell me, is there a direct connection to all of these gentlemen?
Yes, so the gentleman on the left is my grandfather, who was Copper John Williams, and on his right is his close friend, Ronald Self, who was the creator of Citrons.
Absolutely. So Trinidad's like Nigel Morris, certainly with the generation of young remember with great fondness. So he served with your grandfather.
Yes, they're at the same company, and were both sent up and to fend off the Japanese before Singapore fell.
As Frank said, they were since their late 40s and actually Singapore fell many months, and they were captured right over there. Because then they go into this record, and they end up at Changi, which is one of those camps that really will resonate to so many people with so many stories. And actually, from the point of themselves being captured, being made a prisoner of war, he began to draw, he began to document everything he was seeing and experiencing. And he actually said in later life he treated it as a mental lifebelt just to keep himself afloat. And talking with documenting what he was seeing, we've got this story here. Can you tell me your knowledge of it?
This shows just sort of a lot of hanging around, not really knowing what was going to happen. The Japanese soldiers are pictured as well, and in actual fact, my grandfather was sat in front of one whilst he's rapidly sketching away, because if the Japanese soldiers noticed, that would have been that led to some sort of punishment, or who knew what that could have meant.
What I think was starting facts for me is where he hid the drawings. Because you're right, if the prison guards found what would it have meant, I think we can clearly imagine what the truth of it would have been.
Yeah.
He actually used to hide his drawings under the mattresses of the congregations because he knew the Japanese soldiers wouldn't go in. He himself sort of said that even if he hadn't survived, he hoped his drawings would survive so that people could actually see what humans were capable of doing to each other, which we can't comprehend. But I love this down the front. Let's bring this to something positive. Yeah. Big. So we've got this pack of cards. Tell me about the cards.
So I think Ron and his artistic flair had rubbed off my grandfather for honest, and these were disguised as a cigarette packet because of the Japanese soldiers had caught them with that. They would have assumed they were gambling, which was a punishable offence, and it could have been quite severe. So I find it staggering. You can just see how much sort of detail went into every single one, and I hope that kept them busy. So,
And I like that people managed to find the moment where they could play cards.
yeah.
And if that takes them out of that situation for a moment,
I completely agree. I completely agree.
it's an amazing archive. It's so important. Clearly, these two gentlemen were good friends.
Yeah, they spoke a lot after the war. If ever there was anything about the war or something that Ron thought that my grandfather would find interesting, they would always write and cut out some bits of newspapers and really keep that relationship going.
It's a very touching, very poignant story from a conflict that affected so many people. You know, and it's these two gentlemen wished and hoped. We hope that we will never see the like of it ever again. If only this serves as a reason to remind us. Thank you.
Thank you.
After the war, John Wiggins began his life again as a farmer, but the experiences he and Ronald faced never truly happened. And it wasn't just soldiers. Over 130,000 civilians spent years in internment camps and fires. We heard the story of one woman who struggled to find an into and out of the camp, which promised a brighter future.
My mother was called Christine Augustine, and she lived with her parents in the Dutch, in the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. Once in all of that, they knew that the Japanese would be invading Dutch East Indies. They saw them marching along, and they could hear their feet coming down the road, and they were having dinner in their house. And the Japanese walked in and said, pack a suitcase, we want you out of this house. And my mother had had this beautiful dress made for her. And she said to my grandmother, can I take this? Can I put it in the suitcase? My grandmother scoffed and said, don't be ridiculous, you can't even ball gown. So my mother, being the sort of person she was, stuffed the whole dress into the lining of the sleeping bag, and she slept in it in the camps. When they were taken into the camps, they took a radio because they wanted to see if they could hear what was going on. So because they weren't allowed to have radios, they took the whole thing apart, not knowing how they were going to put it back together again. But if it had been found, she would have been beheaded, and a lot of people were beheaded for quite minor infringements of the laws. This was a patchwork made for her by her friends in the camp when she was 21. It's written to the happy birthday and happy returns. So you can see that there are English people there too, but mostly they are Dutch things, little Dutch verses and so on. And she really, really prized it because nobody had anything by that stage. She was thinking further on. And everyone was starving. So what they had, you would bits of shorts and bits of t-shirts and things. It was quite precious. It was really her prized possession. This is one thing that she could always want to be looked after and taken care of. At the end of it all, they were both so thin that when the doctors did eventually get to them, they said they should have been dead years and years before because it was so very bad. My mother was 3.5 stone, my grandmother was 3.5 stone. And of course, it did mean that from then on, nothing in the way of food was ever thrown away. And I mean, it was a bit of the bane of my life. I think the dress shows that she was really hopeful of better times ahead. She wore this dress after the war. I didn't wear this dress, unfortunately, it cannot possibly fit into it now. But she wore it after the war at home, and then she was with my father. She wasn't bitter. She always looked back on the time and said, well, after that, everything is going to be better. So that I thought, enjoy every single moment that you can.
While prisoners languished in camps in Asia through war and religion, it was only brought to an end by one final act of destruction. On the 6th of August 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 5 days later, the second destroyed Nagasaki. In 2019, at Compton Valley in Russia, Mark Smith heard the story of an eyewitness to this terrible events.
Let's start by finding out who some of the victims betray.
That's my father James, and that's my mother Joe. And they are opening a bridge that they built in Malaya, now Malaysia.
Then we have a territorial efficiency here. It has the rather unusual little class at the top, which says the land. Then this little medal and this man in the story. So first of all, he's in the Johor volunteer engineers. And secondly, he was captured by the Japanese.
He was sent to training, and a couple of other war camps ended up on the level of so he was obviously battered, but mentally he's alive.
He actually finishes his time for prisoner of war in a place called Nagasaki. And Nagasaki is the place where they dropped the second atomic bomb, which is what finishes World War II.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he saw it.
He saw it, yes.
He was dramatic.
He mentioned it a couple of times to me, and he said, the world can't do this ever again. And I was going in the other side.
One of the very few people in the world that's ever actually seen my world.
Absolutely.
And survived.
Yeah.
I think we have to take that very much on board.
did enter the party, so you know,
and it's actually really quite a funny thing because, as I say, there's not that many people who actually see what's
no,
really interesting. You must be the toys and the super.
it was difficult maths to get to know because that's something that's very, yeah, fascinating. It changes your personality. Yes.
On the 2nd of September 1945, the Japanese representatives signed the instruments of surrender with the USS Missouri, bringing the war to a final close. The war may have ended, but Poland had only just begun. All over the world, soldiers had become administrators, rebuilding the streets when not before they were fighting for their lives. In Germany, thousands of British men would have joined the Allied control commission to help rebuild and undo the legacy of the Nazis. She wanted to help her how to fight for the British living and working in the wreckage of post-war Berlin.
Here we are amongst the ruins of St. Michael's Cathedral in Coventry, and we've brought a scrapbook in today of another city in ruins. Who does it belong to and what does it show us?
The photographs belong to my mother, Amy James. She was 25 and she applied for a position with the British Control Commission to go out to Germany. She was a secretary.
So it probably was an opportunity for her to travel, to go further than she'd been before. You know, wars always open up possibilities for women, certainly. So this is Berlin, 1945, utter devastation. In fact, witnesses said it looked like Armageddon. German people were walking around hungry, haggard, homeless, and wondering whether there was any future. So the Control Commission, the Allies, came in and split Germany into 4 Allied zones: Soviet, USA, Britain, and France. And Berlin itself, the city, which was in the Soviet zone, was also split into 4 zones. So I'm looking at photographs here, obviously of her chums standing by tanks, and they're almost like tourist shots, aren't they? And we've got a very interesting booklet about Berlin here as well, with all the different zones.
That was written by a general saying, this is Berlin, this is how it was, this is how it is now, these are the places that you must go and see. And it describes how the British Commission was received in Germany and how the Germans were a bit apprehensive. They couldn't quite believe that the British were actually going in rolling up the sleeves and helping everybody.
What I like on this page is we have a wonderful invite for an open-air concert by the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra in July the 13th, 1946. So it shows other things that were going on in Berlin, trying to sort of pull the city together and regenerate. Tell us about the currency.
I remember my mother saying that it was totally worthless, because I asked her, the denomination is so high, and she suggested it was useless. Everybody just, it was Russian, or everybody got off different things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a black market rose up, and as it did in many cities over the UK, all across Europe, where you could go and barter. They were bartering clothes, shoes, toys for food, because the rationing really wasn't sufficient.
I wish I'd asked her more questions.
Isn't it always the way? But she's left us with such a fascinating scrapbook of what life is like amongst the rubble.
The task facing those in Berlin was enormous. Homes had to be rebuilt, the wreckage had to be cleared. In 2016 at Old Hall, Paul Atterley saw how some turned the rubble into a lasting legacy of the city's destruction and renewal.
We're looking at a butterfly, and it says, in memory of summer 1945,
made of the rubbish of the ruins of Berlin. And this is a chap called he obviously got together with friends and they began to make things. The butterflies made from crushed brick, broken tiles, bits of glass. And I can imagine British or American soldiers walking down the street and seeing them and thinking, yes, we could have built this city back to life.
Across Europe, there was a growing refugee crisis as millions had been made homeless, including those who survived the Nazi concentration camps of Auschwitz and Belsen and many others. The survivors suffered terribly from disease and malnutrition. The Allied soldiers their role changed from fighting the enemy to caring for those left behind.
My father climbed to enlisted in the outbreak of war, Soviet and Royal Artillery. In April 1945, he took part in the liberation of Belgium, which horrified him. Father was ordered to set up a resettlement repatriation unit in northern Germany for displaced persons. Father had some very talented artists, musicians within the band, and as a form of rehabilitation, he encouraged them to paint and to draw. The Nazis had stripped them of all their physical possessions. The one thing they couldn't take was their innate artistic gifts. Shortly before Father was beginning to mobilize, the professional artist did his portrait and presented it to him. I think that was done really as a thank you for the work he had done in the camp. I'm extraordinarily proud of what he achieved because in May 1945, the war was over for our forces in Europe. He couldn't just pack his kit back like everybody else and got ready to go home. But he was given the task and he decided he would do it to the very best of his ability. His favorite phrase was, if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing well.
The liberation of concentration camps at the end of the war had revealed the true scale of the crimes committed as part of the Holocaust. The Nazis and their collaborators had murdered around 6 million Jews.
Roll the rules, watch the four wheels, outside to our qualification of the in position. Absolutely sporting, Mr. McLaren. Just concentrate on your own game. Manchester unlucky, move up to third, and he does just that. Not enough to challenge Mercedes. These guys look good. The fast lap. It's a battle for pole. We're interested in them. Can Hamilton find something at the very end and take a 100th pole in Formula One? No! And Valtteri Bottas has done enough to deny his teammate. The Finnish driver has taken pole position for the Portuguese Grand Prix. It's a Mercedes front row knockout.
That was a quality qualifying session. Bottas showcasing some of that Finnish grit. He'll lead all that for today's race, considering a 7-time champ is alongside him, and arguably a future champion waiting behind him. Hello and welcome to race day at the Portuguese Grand Prix in Portimao on Channel 4. Joining us as always, Mr. David Coulthard. This season continues to refuse to take any kind of familiar shape. Bottas started 8th like in 1 or 2 weeks ago. Today he starts on pole. Is he got his motive back, or are we seeing another one of those momentary flashes of brilliance, Casey?
I think actually he was relatively consistent in his format performance in the previous season. He struggled, as we explained to us, to really find how to bring it Ireland. So maybe this is the breakthrough moment where now, as in the past, he can match or achieve very closely to Lewis Hamilton. There's a big opportunity for him to right the wrongs of the previous race.
Absolutely, it's definitely a big on the day that is until we see a track. The next stand is for the strictly fast time. The leader, the point is, Max Verstappen starting third today is quicker. Possibly beat Mercedes. Well, that's the first race, and I know that a couple of weeks ago, we were able to outstart over the damn track. Those now take the lead and therefore take the control of the race. But it'd be more difficult to do that here. That said, there are two DRS codes, which is the drag reductions zones, which might give an opportunity to rotate Mercedes. They're all very evenly matched to top speed. There are actually two Mercedes ahead of them. That could be problematic for Max and Red Bull along with Springer's one. Well, we can go together. Red Bull but that said, lose the championship to win. Charles Greer has a beautiful box to be riding, and everyone himself. And then see the step back. It's not going to be attention as well. That could be problematic. Everyone wins is never a good thing for these cars, especially when he's on the rear. So we'll see about the impact today. Let's assume that this season is going to be super tight if we lose Max. Apologies. Is there a chance that circumstances warrant it? Podcast might get insight to the other drivers.
One man who hasn't had the best starts this season, Vince Bucky Vettel. He made it into the top 10 for the first time in 15 races for the summer.
We started with soft, so naturally it was an opportunity to start with soft. And it's a long break, but the first lap is always important if you want to make up this. Let's say we're next to Pierre, so
He's at third in the Drivers' Championship. He wasn't too happy with his qualifying, but he does start seventh for the third consecutive race.
I feel like I'm doing well as a driver. I'm driving well. I'm doing well in qualifying, doing well in the race with the strategy, looking up to the tires. Just a bit of a package, a package ready for all this year. And it's showing. So I'm happy for the team to start with them.
It was a really typical race for qualifying. He got eliminated from Q1 for the first time for more than a year. He'll start 16.
Two ways another chance to make it back. I'm certainly the question I need to ask is, what's it like to be one?
Well, Steve, I think it's something which I'm very grateful to the one who chose me, first of all, and it's a great responsibility, a great honor. And for me that, was born in the middle of the track is something that I think it's real, I don't know, but it's like that. Actually, that's a good point.
For our viewers at home, you run racetracks, you were born beside a racetrack, you run Formula 1 team. So, what is a day in the life of Central Hub like now?
I don't know, I'm just thinking that now there is a lot of things to do. It's great to see, that we are in a great moment for Formula 1, so I also that duty to make sure that all together we can do great stuff. And that the intensity, the energy is real, and I'm very good because I can give my system. And I watch the future and also the present with an incredible intensity.
Let's stop business. Let's get to it. In an ideal world, what is your hope that sprint racing will bring to Formula 1?
Well, in the ideal world, I think that the idea that we share with the teams and with the drivers is, first of all, drivers love
give some intensity to that, work to the people that are coming to the track and also to the people watching it. So we have something special on Friday, straight to qualifying, to be ready for the holy sprint that will be on Saturday, shorter race, once again, when you see a different moment of intensity with all of that, trying to be the best, and then go to the final race where it's the real event. So I think there will be a lot of action going on, a lot of interesting points to discuss, a lot of moment to make sure that also guests can come to the big twice. We're going to give a lot of things that I believe that will be beneficial to grow up. But as we said, it will be a test together. They're very open-minded, and if we feel that we bring something good that we really hope, then we will go for a planning.
Well, I think actually you answered that perfectly because a lot of tourists sort of reach out to me and go, oh, why are we making it the weekend? But actually, you have the race or slot to race. That's a fact. That energy is going to be played out into the crowd and the audience is there. So let me ask this then. So you're trialing communities. What is the bigger picture then in this sport? Could it be all in the coming years?
I personally think that all is too much. I think my thinking behind that is we should have a sort of a grand slam approach where we can have maybe 6-7 races, I don't know, but and the drivers who can be able to win, qualifying sprint body and race, that's where we get more to the sport and also to the driver. So this kind of competition is action. I think will bring, to be in a different situation. I think will be interesting to consider that.
You've inherited Formula One in the age of COVID-19. 23 races are planned this year. Although we've had Amstel and places like Turkey. Realistically, how many races do you think we'll actually have this year?
Steve, the target is we have announced 23 races, and then we want to do 23 races. We should be flexible enough to be reactive. We have the problem with Canada, we to Turkey, and we were there. So we hope that with the situation improves with the vaccination, with the things hopefully getting better, the second part of the season, we may have also people back on the track, and this is really the time. We need to be flexible. We cannot promise the moon, but for sure, on our mind, we have recommended different plan in case some other track will have problems. We have to respect that, but at the end, it's totally the same strategy.
Well, we can't promise the moon, but my presidential lap on the BRDC, can you promise us that we can have a crowd there? Because, after the 21st of June in the UK, things are really opening up. We'd love to have grandstands full.
Mr. President, I think that will be something that will last. No, I'm joking, but it will be fantastic. Of course, we need to respect what the British government decide on that. The signal are positive, are going in the right direction. That would be fantastic. But, big crowd. I don't know what I can do here. As an Italian independent touching head of water, I should do something different. But let's hope that because also the situation in our pandemic is going in the right direction.
Seven up again, congratulations on getting the big job. We're very happy for you. Please don't go anywhere, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break, but first of all, Steph, I was happy to stick around. So we can do this great, fantastic season we're having. Plus, Max Verstappen and I sit down for a chat. Thank you. I feel like we've changed now. You see the more sector, see more relaxed, see like you're having fun. To be honest with you. Okay. I'm getting old. 23. You're from one, so you have to take that into account. I think you grow a lot as a person as well in those years. I mean, I remember the first year I came in, you're in Phoenix.
Full coverage of sponsored by Bristol Street Motors New Cars.
Welcome to the electrifying experience. You can plug in hybrids.
When you're booking a hotel, it's reassuring to know exactly what the resident
offers no unexpected surprises. A friendly face, a clean computer, as much brekkie as you can handle, so you can work away without the worry. Welcome to bed, we're here to help you rest easy. Premier Inn, rest easy. Only available to book at premierinn.com. This is the renter. She likes to leave new keys into her keyboard collection and observing the clouds before breakfast. The renter settles in, stays out, and snaps up a dream job in Brentford. Because despite an unusual navigation technique, the renter has a certain knack of finding what's right now. If you think this is bonkers, some people sell their car without getting the full quote in under 60 seconds on a new car. I mean, why would you do that? You've got nothing to lose. To find out how much your car's worth in 60 seconds, actually register now on WeValueCar.com.
A coffee for lattes that's just called a latte. What if everything was this simple? Do you want to get married?
Yes.
Where?
Who cares? What should we do now?
What do I stay married?
Taylor's great coffee, made simple.
We're all trying out 5 to 8, but we all try to get some sort of exercise. But then we all sleep well. Getting the right amount of good quality sleep can improve your physical health, mental health, and our behavior. The first step is finding a bed that's just right. Furniture Village, every town here.
I'm confused, but this has been sucking my long way. It's actually in some of the places clear as can see. I'm confused.
That cemetery, it's not really all that safe to go all around it. This place brings things back. Done some things, it's not like an undo it. Sometimes dead is better, based on what Stephen King and that little premiere of that cemetery. Tonight the town channel 4. Full coverage on 4, sponsored by Bristol Street Motors New Cars. We have an exciting motor rescue today. It's in the office. We can all feel it. Access to that will no doubt play a significant role. I'm very sure he was an idiot and losing all track limits yesterday.
here to win first the title at least. Is that has been is great competition. It will be, let's say, if you have the job done, you can do the thing you have to do at the show, but when it comes to races, there's so many things that happen still. So we just have to make sure that we are so far, every single Grand Prix, but I think it is very, very close to the two teams. And yeah, I think it will just depend which prices the track. Less information. So the learning years from now, you guys I don't need anyone to tell me what they do because I'm not interested. I can do my thing and that's it. I'm getting old. So, you have to take that into account. I think you grow a lot as a person as well in those years. I mean, I remember the first year I came in, I hear even through all the preparation I had with my dad, for sure it helped me a lot to get to where I am today. Like, the experiences I've had in the last 6 years in football helped me a lot to be very calm and relaxed and chill, which I was already, but even more. And then focus on what you have to do and know what you're doing. And yeah, and then in general, just enjoy what I'm doing all factors. I think that's very important. Last time you it's the big one. Can you win the title in 2020? I hope so. We don't really. I'll do my best. See where we end up. That's awesome. Thank you. Good seeing you. As promised, Stefano Domenicali is with us, the current CEO of Formula One, or as we like to call him, the Grande Formagio. Come on, that's good, Stefano. We're on that. Who thinks he's idea? We just saw Max Verstappen. It's such a talent. Can I assume you're a fan?
Absolutely, it's great. I think that he's giving a lot to the sport. He's, I think, in a great shape, and I'd love to see. Yesterday, when that basically was not on the full position, it was frustrated because he thought he could have done it. And I have to say that I like also the fact that he seems to be different from the person that he came to football. That is there, but the duration of the race is clear. So I think that this year we have fantastic thing. The is really great. And I think you're going to take the chance to get the change the sport for the next year. Yeah, but I would say that we have a presence of the drivers that have the time to be. They could be really good. And they connected to their fans in a different way. And there's nothing is a good answer to that because they don't give way of connected. In consideration, it's a great sport of your life.
Yesterday, when Max lost due to exceeding track limits, it's been an issue for a lot of them Formula One track limits, but a lot of people are getting a little bit sick of it. Is there any chance you can speak to the FIA and get this fixed so he doesn't pop the thing in his head?
Because seriously, we discussed with the FA yesterday that point that they understand and we understand, and I think that the FA has the intention to fix it because we know that for the public protection is something that is protectable. And we need to make sure that this is not a subject for discussion. And I'm sure that the FA, our friends, will do the right choice.
Back to this, this monster battle we've got brewing this season between Red Bull and Mercedes. You boys have been involved in Food Plus Championships over the years. Stefan, over you with Ferrari's team principal in 2008, 2010, 2012, all extremely close. What's that like? Exhilarating, exhausting? I mean, the pressure must be immense.
I mean, in this position is only exciting. In other positions, depending really where you are, could be, as you said, but in my position is exciting, but it's not mine. It's the position of the world of Formula One is really loving this kind of atmosphere. And as I said, this is all energetic. This is really what should be Formula One. And with the fact that we really hope that we have fans and pocket back again on the grandstand, on the paddock, this energy will be spread around. And this is really what we're going to have, hopefully, within this year.
Absolutely, Stefan, so good to see you. I will let you get back to running Formula One.
Sorry.
All right, we've got a race to get stuck into. But first, our driver has taken important respite to show their solidarity in a fight we're all in, the fight for global equality. The time has come. Let's join Alex Jakes and David Cooper.
Have we run out of kitchen roll?
The 2021 season.
Huh? Well, no, okay. Huh?
Thank you, Steve.
I don't know.
Welcome to Portugal, which had to wait 24 years before getting its Grand Prix. And now, Algarve International is about to host its second race in just 7 months. Like last year's history-making contest, Ruby's not time on its key, and we have a fascinating grid. Strategic choices following.
Yeah, I found some.
It's
It's been a couple of things.
to the soft, or the soft medium. Either way, we are nailed a one-stop strategy. But for the first time this year, the Mercedes Red Bull together at the front. The single tires as well. You break it down to Sainz and Vettel. You see the first of the soft corners. Six round in and Norris there and McLaren 7. So I think we've got we've shaped together. This is the next step project for us. Between Mercedes